Bob, we got Ashley on the line. What do you want to ask him?
For going forward to be able to hit your 200 unit number, what's the plan financially for that? Are you going to syndicate or take a supplemental from the 32 unit, or what's the game plan?
The path I'm on right now is a straight syndication model. The things that I've done recently to help get myself ready for that, I've got a website, I've got an email system, I've got a great database of relationships that I already have after my 15-year career as a broker. And so I've kind of parlayed that, customized the database, and I'm sending out video updates, things like this. I'm growing the awareness that, hey, Ash, he's had success doing this himself. And now I'm ready to share this with other people. And 2023 is going to be a great year for it.
I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different than everything else out there. I bring together a new and an experienced investor on each episode, and I let the aspiring investor ask the questions that they need answered. So if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably will have the exact same questions. Now, before we get to this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and that little bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show. Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe, director of the Tribe of Titans Multifamily Education Group, and I'm very excited for today's show. It's another one of our Ask the Expert episodes. We've got two great guys on the line with us today. We got our experienced investor, Ashley Garner, and aspiring investor, Bob Mason. So, guys, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Great. Glad to have you guys. Ashley, you're going to be up first. So let's talk a little bit about you. So do us a favor. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, great. Well, I am 52 years old, married, and got 2 kids. And that factors into a lot of my big why that we'll probably hit on later. I've never had a quote unquote real job that I would say. I've had very few W-2 jobs. I've always had a 1099 type job, which is still a job, by the way. It's just an IRS distinction about how you pay your taxes, but it's still very much a job. Keep that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to the Rich Dad, Poor Dad or Cash Flow Quadrant, it's an S instead of an E is the difference. Yeah. Right.
Right. So I grew up in real estate. My dad was a banker, but he always had a side hustle going on with flipping a house or that kind of thing. And as I entered the high school age, he started buying what were student rentals at the time near a large university in the town we lived in. And they were old houses, and then they would internally subdivide it into 2, 3, 4 units, depending on the size of the house, right? Well, I was 16, 17, 18. And so I learned to dig out broken sewer lines and put vinyl siding on houses and do all that. And then, moved into the leasing and the financing and the legal aspect. And so I kind of learned that mom and pop way of investment real estate from the start, right?
Yeah.
And then like any good teenager and young adult, I thought I knew more than anyone else did. So I had to go do my own thing, right?
Yeah, that's every teenager in the world. And I've had a few. Yeah.
Yeah. So I took my time and, I worked for a real estate appraiser. I worked for real estate brokers, things like that. And then I actually got to work with my dad in the development business and some commercial real estate types things. Then the main part of my career has been as a real estate broker. So residential real estate broker, I call that my day job. And, I thought I was doing pretty good. I'm a big fan of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I get the passive income, and that was all very important to me. Like, I didn't like the fact that if I don't get out of bed and go to work, then I don't make a paycheck. And even to the point that if I die or if I stop working, then it just, the record scratch and it's over. And so that never set well with me. So I decided to buy larger multifamily properties on my own and started with duplex, triplex, then went to a 10 unit, then went to a 32 unit. And the 32 unit is the largest that I own right now. But I think I've achieved what most people would call financial freedom, right? If I didn't increase my expenses and my cost of living today, then I can exist, right? Yeah. But when you reach a goal, then you realize there are other goals. Yeah. So now my goal now is 1,000 units in 5 years, with 200 units in 2023.
Okay, nice.
That's what I'm actively working on right now.
So you got the box checked, and I'm at the same spot. if I stopped working, I would exist. We eat beans and rice every day, but the mortgage would be paid. But
Right.
yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. I mean, my first goal was to replace my W-2, and it's replaced, and it's going to keep coming. But now there's always the next goal and other goals. So, well,
That's right.
cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk about getting into those first couple of larger units and, walk me through some of the challenges you had, going from the duplexes to the larger and larger up to the 32.
Yeah. Well, I'd say the biggest hurdle for me, and I'm still working to overcome it, is just mental. Like I said, I grew up, I understand the nuts and bolts, the paper side of the business, like the back of my hand,
Yeah.
like breathing air. But the difference to me was I grew up in the duplex, triplex world, mom and pop, hands on. But I realized that I was mathematically eliminated from making the money I wanted to make if I kept it at that pace.
Yeah.
And so I had to go bigger. And so all right, Ash, you can do this. You can handle it. It's the same. It's just 10 more units or 30 more units instead of 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So that was the hard part for me. And so the 32 unit I thought was going to be my first entry into syndication structure.
Yep.
And so it's funny because I've been to the trainings and I've read the books. I've done it all. So I was all geared up. I had my attorneys ready to go.
Yep.
And this deal happened to only need like $335,000 in cash, which to me at the time might as well have been 35 million. Right.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get, 7 investors at 50 grand a piece, and we're going to do this. So the first investor that I asked was a friend of mine, grew up with, and I said, would you like to be a part of this? Here's the basic numbers. He said, yeah, that sounds good. I said, okay, well, I'm going to do $50,000 shares. How much would you like to be in for? He's like, well, if we do it, we're just going to do it all.
Nice.
So I was happy, thrilled. And then I was like, but wait, I didn't get to do my syndication.
It's a good problem to have, though. I mean, it's
right.
a good problem to have, that one investor that writes the big check. So
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a learning experience for me about the perspective that there's a whole lot of money out there in the world. And if you can show them a good deal with a good return, the money's not usually the problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, something else I'll point out here, how long did you know this guy? You said he was an old friend of yours.
Yeah, I'd known him since college. Yeah. I'd known him a long time.
Yeah. So I think there's 2 parts to that. And I mean, you know this, but just explain, talking to the listeners here, but you have to have a good deal that makes sense. The relationship is key as well. And he probably, I would say 3/4 of the reason he invested that much with you is because it was you, and not somebody else. So.
No, I think you're right. He knew my track record. He knew that I understood the business, and there certainly was a level of trust there that I didn't have to overcome that hurdle. Yep. So the relationship, like in any business, is the key to that.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. And that is the secret to capital raising. That is the secret to syndication, is it's the relationships. If you focus on the relationships, I mean, obviously you got to be able to ask people, pitch your deals and tell people what you're doing, but the secret's 100% relationships. You build the relationships and people are happy to invest with you. So let's talk about, one of the projects you've done, a little more details. I mean, you talked about the 32 unit. Do you want to dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a good one. The 10 unit one was a great one, and I thought I would never do another deal that was that good.
Yeah.
Until I did the 32 unit, and nice. I bought it at a price that was probably like $32,000 a door in 2018, which now is unheard of, right? But at the time, it had probably 20% physical vacancy.
Okay.
I mean occupancy, and probably 10% economic occupancy. It was just poorly managed. It was a well-built 4 buildings, 8 units apiece, all brick, near a mile walk to a private university. So all the things lined up, and it had been poorly managed. So when I got it, basically it was empty for all intents and purposes. And so we went about a full 32 unit, renovation, reposition, if you will. We changed the name, we changed the marketing, and repositioned it in the community. And now it's 1 unit empty, which I think is 96%. And I keep way, almost like a model unit, which is fine.
Nice.
My favorite thing about that deal was, and not every deal can be this way. The 10 unit, I put all my own money in, but the 32 unit, I personally have put in $0.
Yep.
The investor wanted all of it. So like, okay, you can have all of it.
Yep.
Then 18 months into the deal, because of the value add that we did, we were able to refinance it, cash out. We stocked up the replacement reserves account. We gave the investor all of their money back. And so now nobody has any money in the deal, and we just keep getting paid every month.
Yeah, you just cash the checks. That's a huge win right there, you know. And when you can do that, when you can give people their money back and just hold the property and cash flow, something I've been realizing is a lot of syndicators talk about passive income, but when you're selling the property in 18 to 24 months, there's not a lot of passive income there, you know. So what you're doing is you refinanced, you're giving them their investment back. That's passive income. You know, now they're cash flowing forever. That's passive income. So yeah, love it. Now, how did you set up the deal? I mean, you had one guy who's bringing all the equity. You know, what were your splits and different ownership percentages?
Well, so in this particular one, it was 50.1% me and 49.9% them.
Okay.
And that was mainly just so I could run it and make the decisions. But you know, when I set out, you know, you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know that traditionally the syndication structure is 80-20 with 80% going to the limited partners or whatever. I just we just struck a deal, you know. That's what's great about this kind of stuff, is that every deal is different, and you just make the deal that works for both sides.
Yep. Now, in this case, I'd argue that 80-20, I mean, it sounds like it was a lot of work. I mean, you start out with 20% occupancy. In those cases, you know, I think the splits that are more favorable towards you are merited, you know. So, I mean, a lot of times, you know, 70-20, 70-30, 80-20, but what I've seen from the syndicators who are doing the deals with a lot of hair on it, like the 20% occupancy, the full rehabs, their splits aren't 80-20. You know, they're usually coming in, you know, 65-35 and sometimes 60-40, but you know, it's just because it's a lot of work. So I still think you got a pretty good deal, and sounds like your buddy had a pretty good deal too.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a win-win situation. And I had I had the acquisition fee to me. I still have the asset management fee, which is a small percentage of the gross rents. And that comes in every quarter. I get a check for that. And we do monthly distributions, just because we're at the point where the cash flow is such that we can do that and still maintain our levels of reserves. So yeah, if every deal that I could do from now on could be like this, I would be very happy.
Yeah. So for you, no money in, a lot of work, and now you've got a stream of cash flow as long as you own the property. You got equity that's building. And, you know, as things appreciate, you know, your net worth grows and grows and grows, and you're still got that income stream. So that's right.
And we've still got a 3.75% interest rate on the fixed debt for another, I think, 5 years. So well, at least I don't have to worry about that right now. Thank goodness.
No, that's also a huge bonus. I mean, looking at rates right now, I mean, 5s and 6s are where you know, most of the rates are starting right now, depending on what loan product and where you're at. Actually, our last acquisition, we had a floating loan, and it's at 7.25% right now. So, yeah, I mean, we're waiting for those rates to come back down. I hope they come back down quickly. We're paying our bills, but man, that same property with a 3% loan would just scream. But so cool. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about why. You know, so what's your big burning why?
Yeah, well, like I said, my family factored a lot into it. The mindset of knowing the freedom mindset, really, to the mindset of abundance versus scarcity. Instead of, I'd like to do these things, or I'd like to experience these things, knowing that we can do them versus, well, I need to ask off time for work, or I need to check and see if I can afford to go do it. Those limiting factors troubled me and still do. And so that's that's why I still have the same motivations for that. And I really would like my children to learn that mindset, or at least be around it and know that that's a real way to live, versus feeling the burden of, oh, I have to work, or I'm stressed out.
Yeah.
I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And I think a lot of that is a mindset. I understand that there are different situations in life, and I respect that 100%. And I also am very grateful that I am in the situation that I'm able to be in versus others. But I do think it's a mindset that helps you step into the next role. And I want my family to learn that.
I appreciate that you shared that. And as you're doing that, I've got 2 daughters in their 20s, and I've got 3 kids in elementary school, which is, a big gap. But, I think the preponderance of my older daughters' lives, I was in that paycheck to paycheck mentality. And I think my younger kids are it'd be interesting to see how things are, 20 years from now, how each one of those kids think and what they're doing when they hit 40. But there's still time. I mean, there's still plenty of time, and I can still influence. But yeah, it's you want your kids to learn that so that they don't have to, relive the same lessons you did. So cool. Well, last question, and that's what's next for you.
Yeah. So my goal is 1,000 units in 5 years.
Okay.
And so that's 200 units this year in 2023. So as we speak, literally before, 2 hours ago today, I sent out another LOI. I sent out one 2 days ago. And
Nice.
the one that I sent today was $3 million and 35 units. But the one I sent 2 days ago was $22 million on 180 units. So I'm forcing myself to step again outside of that's another comfort level that I haven't achieved yet. I'm forcing myself to get outside of that.
Yeah.
But as I do it, I realize it's the same. It's just the same business. It's just a bigger number. That's all it is. And
and you start getting this is what happened to me. I was very hesitant, on the 1 million, anytime something hit 7 figures, I didn't want to look at it at first, and pretty soon I got comfortable with 7 figures with a 1 in front of it. And okay, that's obtainable. I mean, I could probably find 5 people at $50,000 each, and that'll get me to that point. But the more you deal with larger and larger numbers, the more they seem obtainable, and it's less of that sticker shock. So that was the exact same thing I went through, and just starting to open the aperture a little bit and allow those larger deals to come in, it does help. It does help. So, well, cool. Hey, thanks for sharing that. Very much appreciate it. We're going to switch gears now and bring Bob on. So Bob, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. So do us a favor. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I guess I'm a little opposite of Ashley. I grew up, my dad was worked in a factory, actually for GM Lordstown. And basically he was, go to college, get a good job, go to college, get a good job. And that's exactly what I did. Went to Penn State for architectural engineering and became a structural engineer. I've got my own firm now. And along the way, basically did some capital project management, have flipped some houses along the way. I've also passively invested in some syndications. And basically, what I do now, is kind of very niche as far as structural repair goes. I've got 3 daughters and a wife as well. Quite frankly, they're probably not going to become structural repair engineers.
Yeah.
So, as far as getting, basically teaching them a skill that they can take into adulthood where, if they want to be an artist or, a singer or anything that, basically they're going to struggle financially for a while, basically I want to get them a financial kind of knowledge baseline so that, basically they can chase after whatever they want.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I look at what I did, and, I spent 20 years in the military, and I feel the same way. It's not because, I didn't leave with like a bad taste in my mouth or anything, but I don't particularly want my kids to be in the military, because it was a hard life. And my dad had the same opinion, about me. He was a letter carrier. He delivered mail for 30 something years. And he said the same thing to me, is I don't want you to do what I'm doing. I want you to get into something better. So I think that's something that all 3 of us have in common, is we want our kids to learn a better way of life. But So Bob, along the structural engineer lines, I mean, I've walked a lot of properties and that looks like they might need structure repairs. Are you the type of structural engineer that goes in and, fixes those problems on large multifamily?
Yeah, so we would make those recommendations. Also, before I had kids, I would do a lot of property condition assessments. So I guess a little bit opposite of Ashley was, so I would do that for the really big properties. So your 100, 200, $300 million properties. So essentially, it's just like buying a house. You go in and do an inspection, except for that large of a property, you hire specific firms that do property condition assessments, and then they basically gather a whole bunch of experts. There's a specific elevator guy. I think he was a elevator technician, but essentially he would tour the country riding up and down on top of elevators. So I would do, building facades, structural repair, structure, parking garages, things like that. So
awesome.
So I kind of got exposed to much bigger stuff, but to what both you guys were talking about, the numbers, for me to be able to personally invest were just, just out of completely out of mind.
Yeah, I remember first time getting into, when I started looking at apartments, I was doing essentially what Ash was doing is, buying stuff, trying to buy stuff for myself. And, I sold a couple single families and I'm like, okay, I've got, this much money sitting in the bank that can buy me an $800,000 property, and that's how I started out. But, I had no idea how people were buying these gigantic apartment complexes, but I'm glad I learned. Yeah, I'm glad I learned, but that's cool. It's cool. I mean, when we're looking at properties that have structural issues, I'll have to call you, and see what you can
Absolutely.
tell us. But
that's basically my main specialty that I focus on.
I've walked away from a couple of properties because of structural issues, where you see, okay, look, there's big cracks on the outside, lots of so far for what I've done, I've walked away from stuff like that because I know it can get expensive and I know it's a big deal. But anyway, glad to know somebody doing that. Hopefully we get you out of doing that and you're, multifamily investing for the rest of your life. But
absolutely.
So you talked a little bit about family and reasons why you're doing things, but if we could boil that down and focus on that for a little bit, what is your why?
My why is pretty similar to Ash's, where basically, if I don't wake up and go to work, basically, mortgage doesn't get paid and we don't eat. So it would be, my ideal next level would be getting to the point where essentially our living costs are covered with passive investments, and that's basically what my goal is right now. So
awesome. Get those living costs now one level deeper. How would your life change if you reach that?
I'd probably be able to take off time a little more. I'm probably a self-proclaimed a little bit of a workaholic, so probably gearing down a little bit more there. And then again, getting that knowledge of investing in apartments is going to be a skill I'm going to be able to share with my wife and daughters, and so that they can kind of grow up learning that, so that that's a life skill that they'll have going forward.
Awesome. Well, cool. Let's see if we can give you a couple pointers here and there to get you on that path. So, Bob, we got Ashley on the line. What do you want to ask him?
You nailed my first question. I was going to want to talk to you about your first deal. So that 10 unit sounded pretty good. So actually, I have, I guess, a few follow-up questions for the 32 unit. Did you have a single investor on that one, or is that the first one you actually syndicated?
Yeah, so the 10 unit one I actually bought myself. So I used my own cash for the down payment portion, and it was a much lower purchase price, relative to anything we're talking about now. The 32 unit, I had the one partner for.
Okay. For the 32 unit, how long did it take you to rehab? And basically, was that just you had that as a line item for all of your holding costs during that 12, 18, 24 month time period?
Yeah. So I had in my pro forma, I had a refinance scheduled at about year 3. That's what I thought it would look like. We actually reached the point where we could do the refinance in 18 months. So we were ahead of schedule, but it was 18 months of some serious grind on the management of that renovation project. So we had the contractors lined up. This was probably actually the first of all my projects and all my history that I didn't actually swing a hammer on at least once. Up until this one, I participated somehow in the physical renovation. And when I got to this one, I realized, I can't even make a dent in it myself. This is, I'm gonna run it like a business, and I'm gonna manage it, and I'm not gonna swing a hammer. And so I had, all that lined up, and it took about 18 months. As we finished a building, we were able to lease it up, and we've been building rents ever since, and we're still pushing them. I still personally don't think we've reached the full market rate, which is kind of nice because I still have value I can add.
Yeah.
18
Absolutely.
months. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, that's a good time period. I guess for that 32 unit, what's your length of hold? I know you said that basically you cashed out your investor, and do you have is it 5, 10, infinity?
That's a great question, and it's probably a little different on this one just because of the ownership structure. It's me and it's a friend of mine, and versus me and 50 other limited partners. But on this one, we have no money in it. We have fully stocked reserve account. We have room still to grow the rents, and we're making a great cash flow as it is. And yes, trust me, 2 years ago, 18 months ago, it was very tempting to try to think that we might sell that thing and make, millions of dollars because the cap rates were so low. But we just could never get our head around, all right, if we take this millions of dollars, we can't go buy anything because the prices are too high. They're silly. So we just decided we would keep this one. And one day it might make sense to do another cash out refinance and use that money to go step into another property and continue to own this one. That's really kind of what we hope to do on this one.
When you were kind of going through that exercise of do we sell now 18 months ago or so, did you think about refining at that point in time, or were the rents just not up to where you would have been able to realize the full potential for the refi?
Yeah, I think at that point, our basic criteria, or the reason we ended up in the decision we did, is that it wasn't enough of a swing one way or the other for the effort to go through the effort. We had already refinanced it once. The interest rate is fabulous. Our cash position is fabulous. And we just weren't ready to do that on that one. Now, the 10-unit one, I'll back up and tell you on the 10-unit one, this is kind of fun. I haven't had any money in that place for 13 years. I've refinanced it 3 different times. I've basically used it like an ATM machine to go, and I bought another 14-bedroom property. I've bought houses to add to different portfolios. So it's just amazing the power. Once you get your head around that, now that becomes addictive because you say, oh, wait a minute, then this thing just buys more things, and I just keep going like that. Like, yeah, that's really what happens. It's just amazing.
Yeah. You talked about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's exactly what he teaches. You buy assets, you use those assets to create more assets. And that's like textbook Rich Dad, Poor Dad right there.
Right. And then you don't pay taxes either. So you get that benefit. You're using the other people's money and, all of these things. And what's great that you'll soon, I think, Bob, you'll soon get hooked on this also, is that you read the books, you listen to the podcast, but it really does work like that in real life.
For going forward to be able to hit your 200 unit number, what's the plan financially for that? Are you going to syndicate, or going to take a supplemental from the 32 unit, or what's the game plan?
The path I'm on right now is a straight syndication model. The things that I've done recently to help get myself ready for that, I've got a website, I've got an email system, I've got a great database of relationships that I already have after my 15-year career as a broker. And so I've kind of parlayed that, customized the database, and I'm sending out video updates, things like this. I'm growing the awareness that, hey, Ash, he's had success doing this himself. And now I'm ready to share this with other people. And 2023 is going to be a great year for it. And so if you have any questions, now's the time to ask, because coming soon, the deals are going to be here and we need to be ready to pull the trigger.
Nice. Oh, cool. Bob, we got other questions or?
Yeah, I guess what kind of deals are you going to be chasing after? Basically, deals with that are getting caught with a high floating rate or loan balances come due.
Well, I think that's probably going to be some of them. Yes, I haven't seen that yet. Well, what I'm seeing now is more deals are coming available in the last 30 days. It's been a large increase in the number of deals. The prices are coming down, so it's getting closer to the point that the seller's ask is about what I need it to be to make the numbers make sense. One interesting thing, Bob, now that you brought it up, is that a lot of the deals that are for sale right now have only been owned by the current owner 2 years, 1 year, very short period of time. So that's got to mean that they're up against some kind of motivation to sell.
They pay too much.
Yeah, I would think so.
That's something, I mean, when something that I'll point out, and, as this goes back to your 32 unit, if your plan is to hold it for a longer period of time, it doesn't matter as much where in the cycle we're at. We might, a year ago, we might have been buying at a high, but that matters if you're trying to sell a year or two later. If you're in the flipping 2 to 3 year hold, or if you have that 2 to 3 year bridge debt that's going to come due, then it matters a lot, how much you paid for it. But, when you start looking at long term, I don't think what we're seeing right now is going to be anywhere close to, 2008, 2009 timeframe where prices slid a ton. I think we're going to have a little bit of a slide, maybe a flat lining in some areas and then shooting back up. But yeah, I mean, if you're buying right now, you still be careful, do everything you can to mitigate, make sure you're cash flowing. And then, like I always say, you buy real estate to wait, and over time, it's gonna do well.
That's right.
That's the hope. So that's the hope. Anyway, Bob, back to you if you got more.
I guess the last question would be, would you do one of those big 32 unit renovating the whole thing in 18 months again?
Yeah, I think I probably would. I also think that I did those. The 10 unit was just a big lift as far as value add. It was in rough shape, and that's what I was always used to. That's what I grew up doing. So I have something that's really bad, and then use your own hammer and tools to make it better. And so I was used to that. But I'm beginning to see and know the power of, you don't always have to do that. Some things make sense just as they are. And, maybe the percentage increases aren't as great, but neither is 18 months of solid work on it. Your time has value, and I put a lot of time into that. So I had a significant investment, even though it wasn't a dollar bill right up front. So I probably would, but I also am opening my mind to deals that don't need that.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a couple things. I started in C-class value add, and we had a lot of deals that needed a lot of work. The third property I bought especially, needed a ton of work, and we bought it at about 50% occupancy, not realizing how much work it would need to get it back up to 100. Here's a deal here's something for anybody listening. If it's at 20% occupancy, it's not a management problem. There's probably something physically wrong with that property as well. Yeah, maybe management got it there, but it's going to be a heavy lift. It's going to take a lot of work turning it around. And Ash is shaking his head north and south right now. So, I mean, yeah, it was a management problem that got it there, but the reason they can't just flip the switch and go from 20% occupancy to 100% occupancy is there's a lot of physical problems as well. There's deferred maintenance. There's, things that are just broken, and you got to go in and remediate and fix all that stuff,
Amen.
Yeah, you can put the best manager in the world on top of that, but you're going to have to fix a lot of stuff before you get into it. So anyway, I see a lot of talking about that type of deal. I see a lot of newer investors, who come to me thinking something, they have a really good deal. And it's just like, look, you're going to have to put a lot of work into that. It's not just a, flip the switch and go, and 5,000 a unit's not going to cut it. Let's bump that up by a lot.
for a while.
You go from there. But anyway, yeah, very, very. I'm sure it was a rewarding job in a lot of ways, but I think Ash, from here on out, I mean, you've done the heavy value adds. You've proved you can do it. Now it's just a matter of, do you want to continue to do it?
Yeah, it's definitely more of a job. And I will say one thing, since you brought up the price per unit on the renovation. One thing that I wish I had done better, maybe the one I'll say, no one's perfect, right? So I had to make a mistake, but the one mistake I remember making on the 32 unit is that I thought I had a pretty good budget, pretty conservative budget for renovation, but I missed it. And it cost more than I thought. And so now you're in a position, do you go back to your investors and say, hey, I need more money? Because the bank's not going to give me more. So, luckily I had my cash position from one of these other properties that we just talked about was such that I basically ended up loaning the entity that owned the 32 unit enough cash to get the renovation done so I could get to the refinance, and then I paid myself back. But had I not had that, I would have had to make a very uncomfortable phone call to my friend / investor saying, hey man, I screwed up.
Need another 200K or whatever. Yeah.
And that's not, so in any deal that you do, try to always have more money than you think for the renovations, and you can always give it back or you can save it in reserves, but it's better to ask up front than to have to go back and ask later.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And what was your average, cost per unit on the renovation? Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was about $7,500, which the deals I'm underwriting now, that's almost double. To do the same thing is almost 15 grand to do what I could do for 75 back then. And that was only like 5 years ago.
Yeah, and we saw that we've seen the same thing. I mean, our first acquisition was 2019, and there was one property that we started renovating in early 2020, and 2 years later, I mean, we were still turning a couple of units, and the exact same work went from 8,000 a door to 12,000 a door. We didn't change anything we were doing. Just labor prices have gone up, product prices have gone up, and it's I don't think 5,000 a door doesn't buy you anything anymore. So
hey Ash, so for that 15 a unit, I mean, basically broad brush, what's that scope look like?
7,500 a unit, right?
Well, back then,
15 now. 15 now. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at kind of the standard menu for updating a unit would be paint, flooring, lighting, appliances, and cabinets. Then hopefully you can get away with not replacing all of the cabinets, but a lot of times you have to do them. Maybe you can reface them, but a lot of times you have to replace all of the cabinets. And
what about the tubs? What about the tubs? Do you reface them or do you replace them for that 15?
No, we replace them as needed, but not in every unit. You go in and start tearing out bathrooms and stuff, and it gets expensive real fast.
We'll glaze tubs, and that's a pretty inexpensive, makes them look like new, as long as there's no big cracks or anything, as long as structurally the tubs look fine. A nice glaze over the top of it is going to make it look new, and it's going to pop and shine. And depending on where you get it done, it's about $800. So a lot cheaper than a new tub. Well, we are about out of time. So one last question for each of you to wrap things up. Ash, you get to go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
Oh, yeah. Great. So I like Instagram. So I've got 2 Instagram accounts. One is at ABG Multifamily.
Okay.
And one is at ABG Real Estate. And then I've got a website that's abgmultifamily.com. And those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me.
All right. Sounds good. Bob, same question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
So I don't have a personal website, but probably email would be the best. Bob, the structural engineer @gmail.com.
All right. Almost like Bob the Builder. I mean, you got to make a little show on that one. So Bob, the structural engineer @gmail.com. Love it. So we'll put those links in the show notes. And guys, thanks a lot for coming on the show today. Had a lot of fun. Hey, if you like that episode, make sure to subscribe. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community yet, which we call a Tribe of Titans, you are missing out. Get 30 days free by clicking the link in the description to this episode, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.